Welcome to Civilization Stories, where we explore alternatives to history through the lens of the world's most addictive video game. Over the lifetime of this channel, I have received my share of feedback from the Civilization community, and I find that one of the most vocal subsets of that community is the Civ V crowd. Lovers of Civ V love Civ V, and are not shy about stating that even in 2025 it is still the best of the Civilization franchise. It's not always easy to know exactly what draws players specifically to Civ V over other iterations of the game, but Civ V does seem to be a version of Civ that does stick to players who do enjoy it. Longtime fans of the channel may have noted that I rank Civ V among my least favorite in the series, and I think, with no actual polling and little proof, that most fans of other Civ games, Civ 6 or 4 or any others really, also rank it at or near the bottom of their own lists. The reason I say this is I think Civ V remains one of the more polarizing versions of Civ that players either love or skip. I think Civ V, because it was so stripped down compared to its much beloved predecessor, is what first gave rise to the meme of the Civ cycle, because it was not until the launch of its DLCs that popularity of Civ V really gained any momentum. It was also not until its DLCs that players were introduced to mechanics that carried over into Civ 6. Although I'm not a lover of Civ V, I do love Civ and don't want to completely alienate the Civ V crowd. I even recently was asked to make a Civ V tier list, to which I could only reply that at this stage my knowledge of the game was too limited and that anything I might say about the game's leaders or its civs would hold absolutely no authority. I also recently published an episode of Beyond Civilization about Persia and wanted to include gameplay footage of Persia from across the Civilization series in the video. By the way, the Beyond Civilization videos get a lot less looks than my other videos, but they're really interesting even if they are less focused on Civ the game, and anyone who enjoys history or travel can get a lot out of them. So don't ignore them. Okay, there's my shameless plug, let's move on. So, wanting to add some Civ V footage to my video, I decided to play a game as Persia in Civ V, and you know what? I got into it. But I am going to state now, early in this video, that lovers of Civ V should be warned that they might find this video triggering. Because I'm kind of a Civ V novice, I decided to play on Emperor with everything else set to standard. Oh, and everyone seems to recommend a mod called Vox Populi, but sorry, no. I don't play enough Civ V to justify hunting down all of the best mods, so this is Civ V Campaign Edition from Aspire, meaning it has all of the expansions and DLCs. It's complete, but it's also vanilla. We were playing as Darius, and we established our capital, Persepolis, on turn 1. I hope that folks who checked out that Beyond Civilization episode are going to appreciate that historical accuracy the way I did. The first civilization we met was the Maya. So let's just take a moment to pause right there. For this video, I want to try my best as much as possible to focus on things that Civ V does really well. And so first, let's appreciate the slowly panning camera overlooking Tikal there in the background. Nice touch. Cities automatically come with the ability to defend themselves. I had forgotten about that. I didn't really know what I was doing and got off to a bit of a rough start. Barbarians. You know how it is. But in 2160, I founded my second city, Pasargadae. All of this information in the tech tree. It exists, but I don't know what's important or what to do with it. But learning is fun. By turn 53, I founded my third city, Susa, and thought to myself, 3 cities already, I'm killing it. But no, my people, Persepolis and Pasargadae, didn't seem to like that there were other Persians around. The happiness meter. Suddenly I remembered why I never loved Civ V. Happiness meter makes me sad. But a lot of the beats were the same here in 5 as in my beloved 6, just like choosing a pantheon. And of course, the immortal. Combat animations looked great. A little extra culture there from Mount Fuji. That's fun. Pakal entered the medieval era in 1200 BC. Seems early, but the game didn't come to an abrupt halt with the news, so I'm happy. 150 odd years later, we entered only the classical era. 74 turns in, how are we so far behind? By 1000 BC, Persian people were happy again, but now we were losing money. With all of 4 military units. Wait, roads cost money? Shouldn't a good road network generate income? Are people really better off when cities aren't connected? And excess happiness doesn't offset any of that cost? In 675 BC, we built the pyramids. Trading to offset that deficit still kind of works. By 325 BC, we felt secure enough to build a fourth city, Ecbatana, for which we were punished by subtracting 4 happiness from our global total. Someone needs to explain why an ancient empire would be upset by spreading its culture and influence without needing to draw swords. Go ahead, I'm listening. Workers don't work sea resources. You need a workboat. You know what? I'm okay with that. We completed the Liberty social policy and entered a golden age in 150 BC. Go Persia. Free great person when you do so. That's cool. Let's found Zoroastrianism. By the birth of Christ, our people were happy and we were turning a profit. Life was feeling pretty good. But uh-oh, Germany went from friendly to straight up denouncing me.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
After researching guilds, we entered the medieval era, 1200 years or so after the Maya. By 100 AD, our score compared to our rivals seemed like we were doing fine. Mostest literate people. Okay, cute, I like that. It was about 275 AD that I realized Napoleon and the French had been defeated by Germany. And our people are pissed again. A couple of turns later and they're fine. In 600 AD, we founded Tarsus, and oh boy, that upset us. Research agreements, early form of the alliance, I guess. Costs money to enter into. Okay, that's fine, I accept. Spycraft. Not the most intuitive information panel, but I can figure this out. In 1040 AD, we built the Oracle. In 1230 AD, after researching acoustics, we entered the Renaissance. It's 1340 AD, people are still happy, still turning a profit. Although I don't feel like I'm doing much other than building stuff in my cities trying to keep my people happy, or going to the bargaining table with other civs trading resources to either make my people happy or to stay in the black. Espionage gets you a free tech. Okay. In 1350, Poland founded the World Congress. In 1510, we completed the tenets of Zoroastrianism. By 1530, we had entered the industrial era. Spy or diplomat? Which one is better? In 1545, we built the Sistine Chapel. World Congress made little sense to me, but that's on me. In 1610, with the help of Leonardo da Vinci, Persia built the Uffizi Gallery in the city of Persepolis. By 1625, our happiness was at 15, and we were pulling in 78 gold per turn. I felt pretty good about myself. Oh, hi, Germany. It's cool, they're friendly. But they've got riflemen, so let's make some upgrades, just in case. Oi! Yep, mark the date, 1635. Germany, completely unprovoked, declares war. Yikes. Oof, and we don't even have rifling. In 1655, Germany captured our allied city-state of Tyr. Could we successfully defend Ecbatana? Jeez, and folks are PO'd again. Why? Germany has been aggressive since turn 1. This was unavoidable. In 1690, we founded our overseas colony of Gordium that was meant to make our people happy by setting up chocolate plantations. But instead, at least for now, folks were not pleased with the long-term plan. That year, we also lost Ecbatana, and you know what? That made people happy. Yay, I guess. Germany had kicked our asses, but they wanted the world in a peace treaty. No, I say. In the end, we couldn't save Ecbatana, and it was razed to the ground by the Germans. Savages. By 1735, people were pissed again. No idea why. In 1765, settlers of Persia refounded the city of Ecbatana right where it once stood. By 1790, not only had we halted the German advance, but our counteroffensive was beginning to break through as we liberated the city-state of Tyr. That made people happy. Damn right. In 1810, Persian forces walked into Paris and captured the city away from Germany. Now, I think this should have made people ecstatic, and there was an initial jolt of happiness. Paris was a huge city being wrested away from an aggressive and oppressive nation that was now falling behind scientifically and economically. Persian people should have been delighted to see this great city become a part of Persia and not a major industrial and economic hub in the hands of the enemy. I can see how other nations, especially Germany, might not be thrilled by the idea of such a great city being controlled by Persia. But Persians? They should have been thrilled. But no, 15 unhappiness for all Persians. I'm a freaking liberator. Why? In 1818, we liberated Lyon, fully liberated it, like gave it back to the French who were, extinct. And that made people angry? Using a great general to erect a citadel near Paris, just, for everybody's protection, was seen as an instigation against Napoleon and the French? You're lucky you're even here, pal. Maybe support my attempts to protect your pathetic and backward nation. By 1824, Persian troops were laying siege to Munich. To end the war, Bismarck included Munich, another major industrial and economic hub, much like Paris, in peace negotiations. Persian people didn't like that. Again, not sure why, but I'm sure CIV V has its reasons. In 1826, we were able to select an ideology. We chose freedom, prioritizing tenets that added happiness to our empire, since our people were really angry at our ability to successfully defend ours as well as oppressed foreign nations and city-states. In 1846, Casimir of Poland came to us hoping to join them in a war against Germany. We hated Germany, but we were busy fighting off our own unhappy citizens. CIV V's diplomacy gives you the option to ask for 10 turns of prep time. Nice. Bring that back. 10 years later, George Washington came to us asking if we'd publicly denounce Germany. We were only too happy to oblige. Right on schedule, Casimir came back to us asking us to declare war on Germany. We were oh so close to having fully dug ourselves out of the hole caused by our last war with them, and for us that was close enough. So off to war we went. The war had barely started when we walked into Germany's capital, much as we had hoped to do earlier, but were prevented from doing so because of widespread unhappiness. Now we had achieved one of our chief goals, but oh boy, did it create a deficit. The Maya were also at war with Germany now, and they seized Dortmund in 1876. In 1878, after discovering flight, we entered the modern era. In 1880, the Maya captured Frankfurt. By 1890, we could have easily walked into Hamburg. But even though we were giving our people everything they wanted by trading our excess luxuries in exchange for luxuries from other friendly nations, and building happiness buildings in all of our cities, the unhappiness raged out of control, and we couldn't risk capturing another foreign city for fear of what it could do to the widespread discontent of our relatively tiny empire. By the way, aerial combat animations in CIV V are dope. Anyway, it got to the point where Bismarck was throwing in towns as part of a peace package to end the war, and I had to say no just because of what it might do to my civilization's happiness. By the turn of the century, our empire was suffering from 10 unhappiness and we were bankrupt. Such was the reward for liberating city-states, helping out our friends, and disarming an aggressive neighbor. Despite having trade routes to generate extra income, trade deals with other civs, and running numerous wealth projects in my cities to curb our deficit, nothing seemed to work. My troops, eager for the spoils of battle, had to just wait around for our people to be pleased, but there seemed no way to please them. I began to think to myself what I could have done wrong to end up in this situation. In 1908, after doing everything they'd asked, including going to war against Germany for them, Casimir of Poland publicly denounced me. "You're welcome, you jerk." Apparently, not bowing before them at the World Congress in pursuit of our interests was just a bridge too far. After doing most of the dirty work, the Maya captured Hamburg. I'm not sure what the repercussions were for them, but the only reason Hamburg wasn't part of Persia at this point was because of the negative effects capturing it would have had. There's no way to report what Mayans thought of the situation, but it didn't add to Persian happiness, I can tell you. Units have a country of origin, and you can return them if you capture one. That's pretty cool. Where did that game mechanic go? At this point, I had pretty much had enough. Happiness be damned, we weren't about to let what happened with Hamburg happen at Cologne. We captured the city in 1920. This is when I finally took the time to read up on creating a puppet state which incurs much less of an unhappiness penalty. Still a lot of unhappiness, just less. 3 years later, our forces captured Essen, which meant that Germany, the old aggressor, conquerors of the French, were now resigned to a footnote in history. I felt like I should have been happier since it was us that had changed the fortunes of history. But our people were so pissed off about vanquishing the enemy that our victory felt Pyrrhic. I was receiving messages on my sidebar that several of my cities were celebrating that they love the king, which I felt they should. I had brought security to our empire. But then, why is my happiness score at 16 in the red, and why are barbarians breaking out around my core cities where all of my peace and prosperity is supposed to be? In 1928, Washington offered me what seemed like a good trade offer, so I accepted. But then he was like,
No. Of course not.
what the fuck? Ugh. Civ 5, you almost had me for a while there. He did it again the next year. Oh my god, so stupid. At the start of my 9th and final session, I went and looked at the victory progress screen. I was actually leading in domination by controlling 3 capital cities. Only one nation had completed any of the space projects, and we were doing fine culturally, but it didn't feel like a viable path to victory. Turns were getting long, and I had stopped believing I could win a while ago, simply because it didn't seem straightforward how to get there. I kind of assumed that space was my only route to victory. Domination doesn't seem possible just because of how upset your empire becomes. What was the worst feeling was that I had kind of stopped having fun. The whole war with Germany and being so overwhelmingly victorious while simultaneously being punished kind of soured the experience for me. By 1950, my neighbors since antiquity, Poland and the Maya, went to war with one another. By 1954, my people were finally happy again. I was running a deficit, but they were happy. The next year, we got a notice that aside from the French, who we had helped to resurrect, we were bottom of the pile when it came to military strength. But how can you build a larger army when you're running a deficit? Units require coin to maintain. By 1958, my people were now absurdly happy, but our treasury was losing close to 60 gold per turn. It was unclear why. 2 years later, my people were pissed again. Okay. And now we were losing close to 80 gold per turn. Then, for reasons I cannot fathom, Haile Selassie and Ethiopia declared war on me. Could this really be just over my chocolate plantations? Time to read up on happiness. Why does just having cities make people pissed? Population? Okay. Specialists? Fine. But just number of cities? No. Dumb. But oh, public opinion. That is interesting. It was pretty clear I was going to lose Gordium. But hey, maybe that would make people more happy. I don't know. In 1961, Ethiopia captured Gordium, and yeah, Persians were a little happier after. Just to kick me while I was down, in 1965, despite our numerous mutual defense pacts over the centuries, Washington and America declared war on me. We were doing alright when it came to culture, but as I mentioned previously, it didn't seem like a viable path to victory compared to our opponents. The only way out of this muck that I saw was to change our ideology. I guess by turning the war from hot to cold, those civilizations that had chosen order over freedom had defeated me. I stood to gain 22 happiness, but oh, in the end I actually lost 3 more happiness? Okay, after choosing a couple of tenets, we were back up to 21 happiness, but with our civilization in the midst of a revolution while at war with 2 of the largest civs in the game. By the time order was restored, yes, my people were happy, but we had a huge deficit and were about to have our homeland invaded by a much more powerful set of armies with no ability to build or maintain any defensive troops or fleets of our own. I had kinda lost my nerve and my will for this. My clicks became meaningless because they were made mostly out of frustration and simply to move the game along. America's navy came for Tarsus, which I half-heartedly defended. Tarsus was captured by America in 1973, and it made Persians happy, which I find odd on so many levels. That was enough, so I decided to retire. I retired, ironically, ranked first in nothing but approval? Listen, I don't want to be too harsh to Civ 5. On the positive side, I want to point out that it did keep me invested for several hours, of which I genuinely enjoyed myself. There was a lot of good there, and most importantly, it does feel, in so many ways, like a Civ game. I also want to acknowledge that I understand the link between victory and enjoyment, and yeah, I was defeated. I will concede that I might have derived greater enjoyment had I won. Once upon a time, I was a soccer coach, and we used to teach our students that soccer is a fun game no matter what, but it's even more fun when you're good at it, which is why it's important to practice. I imagine that lovers of Civ 5 have developed an understanding of the nuances of the game's mechanics that I simply don't possess after playing a single game for the first time in over 15 years, and that I might have more fun if I stuck with it and learned how to play a little bit better. But I can't leave this video without pointing out the things that irked me back then, that other Civ games don't suffer from, and that still irk me about the game after this playthrough. So, fans of Civ 5 who've made it this far, this might be where you want to hang up the phone. Thanks for following me to this point, and I'll see you, hopefully, in the next video. For the rest of you still watching, let's dig a little deeper on Civ 5's flaws. Civilization is a 4X game. That stands for Explore, Expand, Exploit, and Exterminate. Since Civ V, the Civilization franchise has suffered from a tall versus wide problem. It's a subject I hope to explore in a separate video, but for now, just to say that Civ V was the first of the Civilization series where playing tall became a viable option where players could still compete and achieve victory. And I think it's stupid. One of those 4X's is expand, and playing tall flies in the face of that. Older Civ games, if you only had a few cities and your rivals had wide empires, you kind of knew you weren't going to win, and that was good. It was part of the spirit of 4X games. Moreover, it was more accurate to history and to life. No one ever expected Uruguay to be the first to travel into space. I mean, no disrespect to Uruguay, I've been there and it's beautiful. But if a player wanted to play as Uruguay and hope to win the game, it should be in pursuit not of faithfully emulating present-day Uruguay, but transforming it into an empire that resembles one of the world's great superpowers with the workforce, economy, and resources to do things like dominate the globe militarily or shoot rockets into space. The Civilization games have devised many formulas to pull the reins on infinite city sprawl, but the happiness meter has to be one of the silliest. And I hope that, over the course of my game, I pointed to a few reasons why. Even Civ VII's settlement cap isn't nearly as punishing or as stupid. The reason I call it stupid is not because I think it's a bad idea to curb infinite city sprawl, or recognize there being a trade-off to founding or controlling more cities. I think it's stupid because it's actually too effective at meeting its intended goal, to the point where it becomes illogical. To explain why I think it's illogical, let's just do a quick overview of what makes people happy or upset in Civ V and what makes people happy or upset in real life, and try to conclude how vast the gap is between the two. My first big beef is this idea of empire-wide happiness versus a city's own happiness. They solved this in later games by each city measuring its own happiness, but in Civ V, the key factor to city happiness is your civ's global happiness. It's the only thing with any consequence. But it's like suggesting that people living in upstate Vermont are just as happy or upset about how they live as someone living in downtown LA. I can assure you, the lifestyles are very different. Now, that's not to say that they can't have similar or different views on how their nation behaves in the wider world, but that ought to be related to how one's nation interacts with other nations. If it wasn't clear during the playthrough, let me hit the point home once again. If you play as, I don't know, Greece, if you conquer a city, that should seem preferable to a Greek than having a city conquered. But time and again, as I took German cities, my empire became more and more unhappy. When America took Tarsus, a city founded by Persians, suddenly my empire became happier. That is ridiculous. Now, don't get me wrong. When you conquer a foreign city, you are adding foreign-thinking people to that empire who might not be thrilled that you've just conquered their city. I can understand folks being a little upset. That's why conquered cities need to do things like leave garrisons, install institutions designed to guarantee law and order, deal with discontent, etc. But the consequence was that, after conquering German cities, it was people in the capital that revolted. I then needed to pull away my garrisons from the cities I had just conquered. If anything, people identifying themselves as true, not conquered Persians should be ecstatic every time a city producing enemy soldiers designed to kill Persians is subdued. And they should get pissed if they lose a city of true Persians to enemy invaders, not the other way around. If a single captured worker unit can identify itself as French and I can return it to the French when I capture it from the Germans, why is it that cities have no sense of identity? For me, the happiness mechanic is a broken mechanic because it is so illogical, and because it is so important to how to play and win at the game. It makes the game unfun, at least for me. Anyone keen to take issue with my reasoning, by all means go ahead. I'm listening. Another thing that I think is actually a weakness in the game is great people. When I talked about playing Civ IV after such a long hiatus, I spoke effusively about how great people were used in that game. Civ V is essentially the same in that you earn great people based on what you do. I don't know if I was just wrong when I felt that way about Civ IV, or if it's the way that Civ V's great people interact with the other mechanics in the game. But making the great people infinite and non-competitive seemed to give me a false sense of how I was doing. I seemed to be generating great people, of some type or another, every 6 to 10 turns. So I thought I was doing all right. But having a competition over the limited available great people actually gives you a greater sense of how you're doing versus your opponents. Lastly, income. Spinning plates is part of the Civ experience. In Civ 5, I almost felt that science and culture just did their own thing because I was so busy trying to make people happy or make sure I wasn't losing money. In the case of other Civ games, if you do silly things like do nothing but build military units and refuse to build your cities with infrastructure to support them, you suffer consequences and armies disband. In Civ 5, I got to the point where I was reluctant to build infrastructure because those buildings cost money to maintain. I was reluctant to build roads because roads cost money to maintain. Eventually, I was left with the world's smallest army, again, which is supposed to cost money to maintain. And yet, despite filling out my trade routes and bartering my excess luxuries, I could not turn a reliable profit. What was I spending all of my money on? What was the AI not building that they could support such large armies compared to mine? I don't want to suggest that I haven't run into economic problems playing other Civ games, but my punishments in those other Civ games always seem to clearly fit the crime. I overdid this or underdid that. I could make a clear connection between the problem I faced from the problem I caused. Here, I'm sure, I trust even, that a savvy Civ 5 fan will point out all of the things I did wrong. But from playing, I have no idea. And what is frustrating is that when you play Civ games from 1 through to 7, you develop an understanding of how the game gives you feedback on the things you did well and the things you did poorly. It has always been one of Civ's greatest strengths as a game that your reasons for your success and failure always seemed clear. When I finished my game of Civ IV, which I also lost, I clearly saw how not suing for peace against the rivals I had defeated and making them my vassal led to them becoming the vassals of my greatest rival. I then pushed too hard toward a military victory against a rival that was too robust to be defeated in time before their spacecraft reached Alpha Centauri. I can appreciate that Civ 5 is actually a more complicated game that is maybe tougher to win at and understand because of all of its intricacies. But I'm flummoxed. All I feel that I learned is that in Civ 5, founding cities is kind of bad. Or at least, perhaps, there's a very defined cadence about how you're supposed to expand. For example, there are national wonders that require you to have X building in all of your cities before you can build it. It then makes sense to only expand cities after you've built a specific national wonder immediately after it becomes available. I don't know if this is how designers intended it, but if so, well, it's fine, I guess, but a bit on rails and designs the fun out of the expand portion of 4X, which is probably my favorite of all the X's. Civ 6, bless the heavens, solved a whole bunch of these problems, which makes it strange that there is a whole community that has never moved on from Civ 5. But I think I understand why they find it so fun. It is not because Civ 5 is better than Civ 6 or 4 or any other game. Those that love 5 are simply better at it than they are at the other games. But what do you think? How do you feel about the happiness mechanic? Am I way off or am I onto something? What's the best way designers have come up with to combat infinite city sprawl? Is there a better way that no one has tried? Let me know in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching, and remember to keep playing and making your own civilization stories, your own amazing path through history, and I'll see you next time.